Computers. We depend on them for work, and some depend on them to keep them alive. Where did it all begin? What was the first computer? And what was ENIAC? This documentary seeks to discover the history of computers and how far we've come since the first computer. So sit back, enjoy, and be taken on the trip of a lifetime, starting in 300 BCE. The electronic computers we know and love were named computers because they performed the work that had previously been assigned to people. A computer was a job title and was used to describe human beings, mostly women, who performed repetitive calculations required to compute such things as navigational tables, tide charts, and planetary positions. Due to the computers being only human, they would inevitably make mistakes, which caused inventors to attempt to come up with a more accurate and faster way of computing. The abacus was probably the earliest aid for mathematical computations. A skilled abacus operator can work out any addition and subtraction problem at the same speed of a hand calculator. However, multiplication and divisions are slightly slower. The abacus is often wrongly thought to have originated in China, but the oldest surviving abacus we have dates back to 300 BC by the Babylonians. A modern abacus, which is sometimes used in the Far East, consists of rings sliding over rods. However, the original ones were pebbles placed between grooves. The Latin for pebble is calculus, which is where the term calculator originated from. Leonardo da Vinci created some drawings of gear-driven calculating machines, but never built any. In 1623, German professor Wilhelm Stickard created the calculating clock, as he called it, and was probably the first gear-driven calculating machine to be actually built. Unfortunately, he died due to bubonic plague, so the device got little publicity. 19 years later, Blaise Pascal, himself only 19, invented Pascaline, which was made as an aid to his father, who was a tax collector. He only built 50 of these gear-driven calculators, which could only add numbers together, but he couldn't sell many because of their high cost and the fact they weren't totally accurate. He also invented, on a slightly unrelated note, the hydraulic press and the syringe. In 1801, the Frenchman Joseph-Marie Jacquard invented a power loom that could base its weave, and hence the design on the fabric, upon a pattern automatically read from punctured cards, held together by a long row by rope. Descendants of these punctured cards have been in use ever since. By 1822, the English mathematician Charles Babbage was proposing a steam-driven calculating machine the size of a room, which he called the difference engine. But construction of Babbage's difference engine proved exceedingly difficult, and the project soon became the most expensive government-funded project up to that point in English history. 10 years later, the device was still nowhere near complete. Acrimony abounded between all involved, and funding dried up. The device was never finished. In 1890, a prize was offered to any inventor who could create a device which would help in counting of the census. Herman Hollerith adopted Jacquard's punctured cards for this purpose. The Hollerith desk, as it was called, consisted of a card reader which sensed the holes in the card, a gear-driven mechanism which would count, and a large wall of dial indicators to display the results of the count. Hollerith's technique was successful, and the 1890 census was completed in only 3 years, and at a saving of $5 million. Hollerith built a company which would grow to be called International Business Machines, known today as IBM. IBM continued to develop mechanical calculators for sale to financial business to help them with accounting. However, the US military wanted a mechanical calculator for a scientific computation. One early success was the Harvard Mark I computer, which was built as a partnership between Harvard and IBM in 1944. The machine weighed 5 tons, incorporated 500 miles of wire, was 8 feet tall and 51 feet long, and it also had a 50-foot rotating shaft running its length, turned by a 5-horsepower electric motor. One of the primary programmers for the Mark I was a woman, Grace Hopper. Hopper found the first computer bug, a dead moth that had gotten into the Mark I and whose wings were blocking the reading of the holes on the paper tape. The word bug has been used to describe a defect since at least 1889, but Hopper is credited with coining the word debugging to describe the work to eliminate program faults. One candidate for the grandfather of the modern computer was Colossus, built during World War II by Britain for the purpose of breaking the cryptographic codes used by Germany. Britain led the world in designing and building electronic machines dedicated to code breaking, and was routinely able to read coded German radio transmissions. But Colossus was definitely not a general-purpose, reprogrammable machine. The title of forefather of today's all-electric digital computer is awarded to ENIAC, which stood for Electronic, Numerical, Integrator and Calculator, built by John Maudsley and J. Presper Eckert. ENIAC filled a 20 by 40 foot room, weighed 30 tons, and used more than 18,000 vacuum tubes. Like the Mark I, ENIAC employed paper card readers. When operating, the ENIAC was silent, but you knew it was on, as the 18,000 vacuum tubes each generated waste heat like a light bulb. 174 kilowatts of heat in total meant that the computer could only be operated in a specifically designed room, with its own heavy-duty air conditioning system. Once the army agreed to fund ENIAC, Maudsley and Eckert worked around the clock, 7 days a week, hoping to complete the machine in time to contribute to the war. One of the most obvious problems was that the design would require 18,000 vacuum tubes to all work simultaneously. Eckert solved the tube reliability problem through extremely careful circuit design. He was so thorough that before he chose the type of wire cabling he would employ in ENIAC, he first ran an experiment where he starved lab rats for a few days and then gave them samples of all available types of cable to determine which one they were least likely to eat. The very first problem run on ENIAC required only 20 seconds and was checked against an answer obtained after 40 hours of work with a mechanical calculator. After chewing on 500,000 punch cards for 6 weeks, ENIAC did humanity no favour when it declared the hydrogen bomb feasible. The first ENIAC program remains classified even today. By the end of the 1950s, computers were no longer one-of-a-kind, hand-built devices owned by universities and government research labs. Eckert and Maudsley left the University of Pennsylvania over a dispute about who owned the patents for their invention. They decided to set up their own company. Their first product was the famous Univac computer, the first commercial computer. Univac was also the first computer to employ magnetic tape. Many people still confuse a picture of a reel-to-reel tape recorder with a picture of a mainframe computer. IBM chose to hire an unknown firm called Microsoft to provide the software for their PCs. This contract allowed Microsoft to grow so dominant that by 2000, the total value of their stock was twice that of IBM, and they were then convicted of running an illegal monopoly. A teletype was a motorized typewriter that could transmit your keystrokes to the mainframe, then print the computer's response on its roll of paper tape. This was a typical way to work on a mainframe computer, using time sharing, which meant only around 100 users could use it at one time. But things changed fast. By the 1990s, a university student would typically own his own computer and have exclusive use on it in his dorm room. This transformation was a result of the invention of the microprocessor. A microprocessor is a computer that is fabricated onto an integrated circuit. Computers had been around for 20 years before the first microprocessor was developed at Intel in 1971. In 1969, they were approached by Busicom and asked to produce 12 custom calculator chips, but integrated circuits were expensive to design, and this approach would require Busicom to bear the full expense of developing 12 new chips, since these 12 chips would only be used to them. But a new Intel employee convinced Busicom to instead accept a general-purpose computer chip, which, like all computers, could be reprogrammed for many different tasks. Busicom agreed to pay Intel to design a general-purpose chip and to get a price break since it would allow Intel to sell the resulting chips to others. But development of the chip took longer than expected, and Busicom pulled out of the project. Intel knew it had a winner by that point, and gladly refunded all of Busicom's investment, just to gain sole rights to the device, which they finished on their own. Thus became the Intel 4004, the first microprocessor. Intel followed the 4004 with the 8008 and 8080. The 8080 was employed in the MIT's Altair computer, which was the world's first personal computer, and it was definitely personal as it was kit-built. A Harvard freshman by the name of Bill Gates decided to drop out of college so he could concentrate all of his time writing programs for this computer, which is how he entered into working for Microsoft. So now we have some idea as to where computers originated from, how they've evolved over the years, and the correct origin of the abacus. I hope that this documentary has helped you in understanding the use of computers and to no longer take them for granted. Goodbye.